Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Difficult Conversations, Embrace Confrontation and Produce Long-Lasting Benefits, hosted by HRDQ-U and presented by Gary Turner. My name is Sarah, and I will moderate today's webinar. The webinar will last about an hour. And if you have any questions, go ahead and send those into the questions area in your go-to control panel. There's a little drop-down box. You can click on that, type into it. I know throughout today's presentation, we'll be asking questions of you to get your input on certain topics, and that's where you want to do that. It should say questions. It might say chat. Hit that little drop down arrow, type in there, click submit, and that'll come over to Gary and I. And that's how you can submit any questions or any comments to us throughout the session. If we have time at the end, we will do a live Q&A. And if we don't, we will send responses back by email as well. Today's webinar content is from our reproducible training library titled Navigating Difficult Conversations. If you are interested in delivering this training within your organization, please contact HRDQ. Our presenter today is Gary Turner. Gary is a senior faculty member of HRDQ, delivering dynamic sessions, certifying trainers, and teaching coaches. He completed his PhD coursework at The Ohio State University, was Organization Development Director at M&M Mars for 9 years, and founded Turner Consulting in 1991. Gary has worked with Fortune 500 companies in the U.S. and in 7 other countries. Welcome, Gary, and thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Sarah. I'm glad to be here today since navigating difficult conversations is definitely a challenging skill. This is an important workshop. It's needed in organizations around the world. And as you can see on the screen here, today we are going to focus on these kind of goals and agenda, which are part of the workshop. First is just understanding the nature of difficult conversations. And then mostly what we'll talk about is how to handle those tough conversations. We're going to look at 7 stages of navigating the difficult conversation. And we're going to look at how do we minimize negative responses and strengthen relationships. Now, Sarah, here's something that's kind of funny. Is yesterday, I realized I had a difficult conversation I needed to make. And I thought to myself, wait a minute, just pull out the 7 steps here. Pull out the 7 steps, look at those, and think through this conversation before you do it. And it was amazing how much having these skills here helped me with that conversation. It turned out it wasn't that difficult. Now, we all in every day have some conversations that we are concerned about, we're worried about, and we think are going to be difficult. So what I want you to do right now, as a matter of fact, is I want you to think about a conversation you have, or you have had, or you have to have, something that has come up that you maybe have even lacked the courage to attempt having that conversation. Do you have one in mind? Well, here's what I want you to do, is think about what was difficult about that conversation. And where you have the chat, type it in right now, and let's just hear a couple of your responses about what made the conversation difficult. And Sarah, when you start getting some in, would you mind reading some as they come in?
Sure, absolutely. Yes, so go ahead and use that questions chat area and you can type those in. Oh, okay, it looks like people have found it. I can see we've got some things coming in. Okay, so helping them see that they have poor performance. Another is getting a commitment from them to improve.
Yes.
Handling their complaint about a coworker, which I don't see the problem. When they disagree with something, that's a company policy that can't be changed.
Yeah, that's difficult.
When they emphasize doing a quality job but are always behind schedule. When they are constantly late to work and don't seem to care about it.
I hear that one a lot.
When we are downsizing and they will be one of those that we let go.
Oh, that's really difficult. Yeah.
And when it's petty things, they always bring up about everyone else.
Yeah, Sarah, let's stop there because there's a lot of different things that make conversations difficult. And these are great examples of what makes conversations difficult. Well, here are some typical examples. Let me show you a few here that we typically get when we do the workshop. We get things like delivering bad news and negative performance feedback and saying no to something that's requested and asking people to do unpleasant or difficult tasks. Or even, here's one that we sometimes get, and acknowledging your mistake, and that's an important one too. And dealing with personal things. There are sometimes personal things that people have to deal with, and those become very difficult. So these are the type of conversations that we're talking about today, and I'm sure all of you out there have something you could be thinking about. That last one's interesting because not long ago, I had a manager talk to me about wanting to talk to someone about body odor, and I remember one time someone talking about wanting to talk about dressed inappropriately for work, and these are deeply sensitive areas, but areas that you really need to have the conversation. So let's dive a little deeper with this. Let's go down below the tip of the iceberg, and let's think about why these conversations are difficult. Why are they difficult? Let's go to the chat again. I want you to type in a quick response now, and we're going to have Sarah read several of these. Some of the things you think are the reasons behind the conversations being so difficult. Sarah, any coming in?
Yep. Yeah. My screen's scrolling. Give me a second. Our supervisors are just uncomfortable confronting bad behavior.
Yeah.
Because all of us like to be liked and don't like to be hated.
Yes.
Because I'm confused about how to approach the conversation. Do I jump right into it or what?
Okay, we're going to talk about that today.
We avoid conflict. Sometimes I don't have all the facts, but only pieces of the puzzle.
Yes, that's difficult.
Because what I have to say is personal and will hurt their feelings. And I've asked before and nothing happened, so I'm not optimistic about the next conversation.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Sarah. Let's stop there. These are very sticky situations. There is a lot of discomfort in dealing with these situations. Um, so, one of it is the things we talk about in this workshop are those hurt feelings, or not being liked, or not being respected as a leader or someone who needs to talk about these things. And secondly, the feeling of powerlessness, like, well, I can't do anything about this situation, or the other person maybe can't do anything about it. And then there's this fear of embarrassing yourself, the rumor getting out about what you did, or being seen to fall short in your own responsibilities, and that's difficult. And a couple of the chats I heard you say right then were about this last one, a reluctance to engage in conflict, or uncomfortable dealing with the wrong behavior on the job. So these are some of the reasons they're difficult. And what you have to do is deal with what are the things causing your reluctance on this. What's getting in our way? Well, some of my professional businesses and being a coach, and it seems a coach with managers, and it always seems like with managers I work with, I sometimes have to push them to meet the improvement goals that they have, and at times I feel uncomfortable with this, but it's in the best interest of my client to do so. When I'm coaching, I worry about hurt feelings, embarrassing myself, or disagreements that might start, or and similarly, some managers in your organizations often have a grueling time with conversations, even though the conversation is in the best interest of the employee. So let's take a look now. What to do. We've seen now some of the things behind this, but here's in the workshop, here's the 7 stages we talk about. The HRDQ workbook follows this outline, and each section has tips, ideas, suggestions, models for that particular stage. And so in this webinar today, we're going to follow these 7 stages and kind of give you a bird's eye view, a quick view of what's in each stage. Notice before we go into it, though, the first stage is a preparation stage, and then look at the 7th stage. It's a follow-up stage, and from stage 2 to 6, we have the 5 steps for the face-to-face discussion. And so those 5 steps that are right there, from 2 to 6, are actually the conversation you will have. And earlier someone said, I don't know how to start it. Well, that's when we'll talk about initiate, open up the conversation. So let's start with then preparation. Let's take a look at this. Stage 1 is preparing for the conversation. And let me just say before we start on stage 1, I believe this is the most crucial step. Yesterday, for instance, when I was going to make that phone call and have that difficult conversation, I really went through thinking this through, and it made me feel more confident, even though I was worried before I started. By the time I made the phone call, I felt like it would go good, and it did go good. And I think that's what's important, is thorough preparation is going to help the remaining 6 steps. So let's look at your preparation. The first suggestion here, these are suggestions that are given in the program, and they're talked about, and there's some explanation. But the first thing here, prepare yourself. What does that mean? Well, you have to be mentally, emotionally ready for this conversation. Never even begin planning when you're upset or angry with a colleague. Calm yourself down. Be calm in your planning, just like you want to be calm in your discussion. Here's a funny thing, though. I like to feel good about how I look even in preparing. So when I'm going to have a tough discussion, sometimes with someone on a day I know I'm going to have it, I sometimes pick out a favorite shirt. So I even plan out what to wear. The clothes you wear may help you feel better and prepare yourself. So for some of you, you might think about that. How am I going to dress for this conversation? But the second item here is huge. I want to know exactly what I do want to achieve and what I am not wanting to achieve. And I want to separate that out and think, this is what I'm going after. Because the conversation will go AWOL so fast that you need this guiding light to help keep the conversation on track. And then, of course, deliver the message promptly, choose the right time and place, focus on the facts, tell the truth, prepare by seeing the other person's perspective. These are all important aspects of that also. And they really help with your preparation when you get it all together. Well, that's how you prepare. This is the how, and there's some discussion in the workshop about each of those things. But the next question is, why prepare? Well, I've already referred to it to some extent. So you feel less stress and tension. You get your message across clearly and tactfully. You cope with your own emotions and their emotions, and you're ready for possible responses. So this preparation is important. I was teaching a class in dealing with tough negotiators several years ago, and I got to the point where I said, "Well, why do you prepare to negotiate with your tough negotiator?" And someone in the class, in the back of the room, started laughing, He said, well, if you don't prepare, you are going to hit a brick wall. Yes, you need to de-stress, get your message across clearly, cope with emotions, be ready for left field responses. Um, so preparation is the first huge step towards your success, and it's very important. Um, so let's take a look at preparing and just do a quick little kind of case study. The scenario is this. Um, Lucinda needs to tell Michelle that the project she just completed is not acceptable. In fact, a significant part needs to be completely redone. Lucinda is not looking forward to this conversation. She knows that Michelle worked very hard and believes she had done an excellent job. There have also been other times when Michelle has grown very angry in the face of bad news. With this in mind, Lucinda knows it is unlikely that Michelle will readily agree to redo the project. So, what could Lucinda do to prepare for this conversation so that it goes as well as possible? What I'd like you to do is type in the first thing that hits your mind here. Type in some responses for Sarah to read to this basic question. Sarah, when you get some suggestions, would you just go ahead and read some?
Sure. So Joe chimed in early and said, know what your central message is going to be.
Yes, Joe. That's right.
Another is appreciate Michelle for working hard on the project.
Yes.
Think through what Michelle's workload is and has been.
Mm-hmm.
Keep a smile on your face even while preparing. Think through all the things you appreciate about Michelle.
Yes.
And work through the conversation step by step.
Yes, that last one's good too. All of those are good, but I like the first one about the central message a lot. What is your central message? And then think through your conversation step by step. Of course, it helps to get in Michelle's moccasins here. And like a few of you said, understand Michelle a little bit more and what's going on. So thank you, everyone, for your ideas. As you can see, there are a lot of different things to consider when you're preparing. Now, as you're preparing, here are some questions to ask yourself. These questions help you with your framework. So, for instance, first of all, in terms of the situation, what are the stakes? What are the facts? What are the other person's perspectives? And then what are your feelings? What's your relationship? What are your objectives? What's your outcome? When and where will the conversation be held? These are various things that are questions you need to ask yourself, and they help you with your framework for what the discussion strategy is going to be. And then you've prepared. Now that you're prepared, how do you actually start the conversation? Before I start talking about this, I'd like you to chat again here a little bit with this. Type in a method of you starting a difficult conversation. Do you tell a joke? Like, hey, did you hear about the turkey that got into a fight? He got the stuffing knocked out of him. I'm sure no one's laughing at that stupid joke, but some people, I think, like to tell a joke, or they talk about maybe something with their favorite football team losing, or do they chit chat about the weekend with the family and just ask how it's going? Sarah, are you getting some responses in?
I am, and some did appreciate your joke. I also laughed out loud to your joke. So
my grandkids love it, Sarah. My grandkids love that joke.
It's a good one. It's a good one. So we do have other ideas coming in. Review in general the employee's work efforts. Mention something very positive about what the employee has done lately.
Yes.
Show relaxed posture and demeanor.
Yes.
Another smile. Get right to the point about the problem. Let the employee know you have his or her best interest in mind.
Yes, those are all good. Let's stop you there again, Sarah. People are hitting it kind of the nail on the head here with you got to be relaxed. I heard that one and smile, and I heard a lot about getting to the point, but also appreciating the employee. So yeah, these are some things. Um, Here's some suggestions in the workshop we talk about stage two is first of all, just let the other person know you want to talk, arrange a convenient time. And when you get in there, set the stage. Sit at a corner at the table or next to one another. It's better than sitting across from each other. There's actually a little research on this that shows when people sit across from each other and have a difficult conversation, it becomes a little more tense. But in this juxtaposition, it's actually a little more relaxing. There's actually some research that shows that that's pretty true. Our main suggestion is this: introduce the subject and get to the point pretty quickly. You know, there's something uncomfortable when you're hee-hawing around, hemming and hawing. You're not getting to the point, and everyone's sitting there waiting for the shoe to drop. Um, you know, and you don't want to make the other person uncomfortable, as many of the chat said just a minute ago. So here are some sample openers. Let's look at some. You've probably heard we lost a big contract. Um, I'd like to talk about your performance evaluation. I need a favor from you. Here's something important that I'd like to discuss. I have some bad news. Um, these conversations tend to get to the business at hand. But what I want you to notice here is this: on every one of these, there's the I perspective, that you're introducing this subject from your perspective, like the I have some bad news kind of approach at the end. You're saying um, what you are reacting to. It illustrates the point from your perspective, and it avoids blaming the other person immediately. It avoids them feeling like, well, you're attacking me. People don't like that feeling. So now let's look at some. Let's look at how we deliver the message. This is stage three, which is we've opened up the conversation, but now we get to the meat and potatoes of the discussion. And so this stage three, like I mentioned before, it's pretty big. And the Navigating Difficult Conversations training program has a lot of suggestions on what you do to deliver the message. So we're going to first look at 5 suggestions that are in the program on what we call delivering the content of the message. The content is what's important. And so you want to be clear and specific and factual. You want to give some examples. You want to be sincere, provide accurate information. You want to ask questions for more information about the information you are presenting. And you want to let the other person ask questions, answer them honestly, and say why if you can't answer a question. So this is about what the actual message itself is. But in delivering this message, it's not just the content that's important. It's also the delivery process, the process of delivering. Here are 4 major things we talk about in the program. Staying calm and using positive body language, avoiding distractions, taking responsibility when warranted, reframing the situation in a positive light. And so the process of delivering the message is critical. And the first one is probably one of the biggest things, is your body language. You know, you've all seen those studies, Moravian studies and others, that say the body language is most of the message. It's a lot of what people are going to be reading, seeing with what takes place. And so you need to really be prepared to use positive body language. Sitting up straight, not crossing your arms, making eye contact, keep a neutral expression or a smile. Sitting still, not fidgeting. Make sure you're not clicking a pen or other things I've seen happen in these kind of conversations. So this process of delivering sends a huge message also. Now, so you've delivered this message, and we shortcutted it here a bit, but you've got the kind of ideas about content and delivery of the process. But what I want to talk about for a little bit is how you listen and respond. That's pretty key here. So listening and respond. The first kind of rule of this is to stay focused. There are three kind of rules we're going to give. Rule one is to stay focused. Clear your mind, make eye contact, focus on one idea, ignore distractions. And you know, this staying focused is not that easy. It's easy to get unfocused on things. The person you're talking to is going to throw in some irrelevant red herrings, or they're going to bring up different issues to talk about that they see on their side. And so your mind can wander around so much. And for some of us whose mind already wanders around, like me, I need to really work at this one, staying focused and concentrating. And so I'd suggest you even practice this skill, not just in difficult conversations, but in any conversation. That you know what the other person is saying, and you stay focused on what you want and what are they saying. It helps a lot. But rule two, let's look at rule two. The second thing is capture the message. This is important. Your brain and sometimes your ink pen need to be really hard at work on capturing the message from the other party. They may have a lot of different reactions. So here's some suggestions. Watch their tone, be open-minded, avoid making assumptions, seek to understand what they're saying, avoid telling the other person what to do when you are in this listening mode, extract their main ideas. Now, some people always ask me, well, wait a minute, can't you tell the other person what to do? You can, but when you're in the listening mode, don't be thinking about that. Make sure you capture their message. What is it they're after? It's a much easier conversation if the other party becomes results focused and they take or make suggestions on improving the problem. So to help all of this problem solving work well, you have to stay focused and capture the message. So that's rule one and rule two. Now, here's the interesting third rule about difficult conversations. Rule three, help the speaker. You know, here's a list of great suggestions. You want the speaker to be able to talk. I've been in difficult conversations where they haven't been able to talk very well. And so you want to help them. So avoid distracting nonverbal actions and encourage them with just kind of head nods and eye contact and those things. Intercede with helpful comments so the speaker can recall his or her train of thought, because they'll get lost. If you're focused, you know, like we said on step two, if you are in some way capturing the message, you will be able to help them get with their train of thought, because they will get kind of derailed at times on what they're saying. And keep your facial expressions kind of open, not frowning, not giving negative vibes. Maintain an alert posture. Avoid interrupting. These things will help them talk. And these things make them feel more comfortable and make them realize that you're there to problem solve, not to attack them, not to criticize, or things like that. So let's kind of summarize this a little bit. that there are three components: staying focused, capturing the message, helping the speaker um, with listening, and all three require some real skill building. And so it helps when your managers or other people are learning this workshop for you to take time and build skill around each of those three things. Now that you've listened and responded, time for stage 5, exploring alternatives. What to do now? What next steps do we need to take? And you want to look at what the different alternatives are and sort of think them each through. So here are some suggestions on that. To handle difficult suggestions that you get, you'll get something that doesn't seem like a good suggestion. Well, don't panic. Listen actively, empathize, acknowledge, respect, validate the feelings about their suggestion, and don't take any of their reactions personally. Stay calm. That's important too. Keep an open mind and negotiate when it's appropriate for them to do that. As these buttons say, I like don't panic. You've probably, like me, heard ridiculous solutions. Just stay calm, and hear those and talk them through as an option, maybe not a great option, but it's an option to put on the table. So these are some things about the first part of working out what you're going to do and exploring alternatives on this stage 5 now. Now, the other part of stage 5 is helping the other person cope with the negative emotions that they're going to have. And a lot of times the other person is still going to have emotional reactions no matter how well you've handled everything up to now. So here are 3 difficult to handle reactions. Anger, tears, frustration. I've seen all 3. And I'm sure many of you out there have seen these too. So if the reaction is anger, allow that person to vent. You stay calm. But of course, in the conversation if the person becomes violent. If the reaction is tears, wait until the other person gets his or her feelings under control. Speak calmly. Take a break if necessary. I remember a conversation many years ago I was having with a lady, and I thought it was going well, and all of a sudden she just broke down in tears. And it shocked me, but I was able to stay calm during this and just let her cry for a minute and say, it's okay. We'll work this through. And then it turned out what she was crying about wasn't even related to what we were talking about. There was just something else going on in her life, and so we talked that through too, and it helped. And by the end, she was really willing to change some of the things we were talking about. And then finally, frustration. Yeah, frustration comes often too. So a break, a soft drink might help you with the tears, and it might help you also with the frustration. But the main thing here is emphasize your role is to help. Once again, stay calm in all 3 of these situations. Just stay calm and work it through. That these difficult emotions are not impossible to deal with. Now that you handle these things, step 5 is how do we really explore alternatives and solutions? So here's how we do to get that big win-win. Identify for the other person, at this point, what is most important to you. At some point here in the conversation, you got to say, you know what I really would like to see here, and what's really needed is this. And then maybe if you have some non-negotiables, what we can't talk about, what's not possible to do. So the first thing here, it really identifies your core must-haves. And secondly, work with this collaborative attitude. toward a win-win solution, something that will solve the problem. And I like the phrase, let's put our heads together here. Let's put our heads together and think through what will really resolve this and solve the problem. And so keep that collaborative attitude kind of foremost. And then thirdly, work with the other person, generate these alternatives, keep an open mind, consider ideas. And I think it's important to take notes on anything that is suggested, so you can remember even later what was suggested or what was their mindset about this. So take notes during this part of the conversation too, where you have ideas being generated. Now, step 6, you're going to close the conversation. At this point, something that has made it difficult to close the conversation needs to be thought about. Some of you out there, like me, have had some things that all of a sudden made it difficult at the end to close the conversation. So I'd like you to chat again one more time here about a conversation you had that just became difficult to close. I mean, the conversation went through it, you went through the conversation, and now you get where you think you can close this conversation out, and it's not closing. So I'd like you to type in here something that made it difficult to close the conversation. Go ahead and put those in. Sarah, would you read some of the answers as they come in?
Sure. This first one I've run into several times. We never come to an agreement. He wants one thing done and I want another thing done.
Yes.
Emotions, the conversation was too upsetting to know there was an agreement.
Yeah, sometimes at the end there's still a lot of feelings. That's a good one.
They will agree but not follow through on what was agreed to.
Yep, that's a good one.
Judy says they clam up at the end and won't say much.
Yes. Hopefully you don't have
Bill,
that, but sometimes you do.
Yeah. Yeah. And Bill says, I had to let someone go and I didn't know how to close except to say good luck. And that just didn't sound or feel right.
Oh, that doesn't sound right. Yeah, I remember having to let someone go many years ago in a job. She had actually stolen property, and it was so difficult to walk her to the door. And so yeah, at the end of the conversation, it was difficult to end it. So yeah, those are all difficult things. Those were all amazing. Thanks for sharing, folks out there, because sometimes this does happen. And what I like to say when I do this training is sometimes your close can't be as smooth as you would hope it would be. You have to realize there are some times where something is just kind of difficult here to come to the closing. So let's look at what the workshop goes through here, at least to give you a kind of a thumbnail sketch here about some of the things. First of all, to cope with non-commitment, like some of you had, there are kind of two. I hope the graphic doesn't offend anyone here, but this may be what you feel like doing. But there are two things at the close of conversations that are tough. And these things are resistance and passivity. To some extent, resistance, which resistance is the opposite of passivity. Resistance is sort of the refusing to go along with something. And passivity is the kind of, well, I'll go along with anything, but I'm not really committed to it. So for resistance, you need to deal with the emotional side by empathizing. And with the logical side, though, by offering evidence. So you empathize with the emotion, but you logically keep dealing with the facts, the evidence, and what's going on here. Well, passivity. You need to ask questions to draw them out. Allow silence to happen. Even if they don't say anything, um, they are thinking. So let them think, because some people don't like to commit very quickly. And so sometimes with passivity, I like to just sit and allow some silence and allow them time to think this through. Um, and both of these are very difficult, of course. And some of the chat we had earlier, I remember one person saying we just never come to agreement. Uh, or I remember someone else, they'll just not follow through. And so part of what you want here is the commitment. You want to leave this conversation that they are committed to doing something. And you want to be able to write down what the commitment is and really pull that out. So here's some other things about closing the difficult conversation. If it's difficult at the end, avoid letting the conversation drag out. But like I said, with passivity, sometimes I do a little bit. I let the conversation just slow down until they seem to understand they can't be passive. And be alert for signs of a natural ending, something that's going to just be the logical steps for both of you. Also, clarify next steps, making the agreement more locked in. This third one here is huge, because you want to make sure that they hear what you have written down as next steps. Matter of fact, you might even write these down and give them a copy after the conversation. Look for ways to end on a positive note. I like to call it sort of the ribbon on the package. The package is agreed to. Now you put the ribbon on it. I really appreciate your coming in and having this conversation. I appreciate you're willing to put out some ideas about how we can solve this. I'm really glad you're making a commitment here to work on this. So those are the positive notes, the ribbon that's on the package at the end. And then I like to also offer an optimistic statement that is about this, or a vision. Like, I believe once we have this corrected, blah, 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 this will happen. So think about some optimistic statement that is that optimism about the future. And then finally, offer them a chance to add anything they want to add that we've missed. And the hope here is that you're able to smile. You're both able to feel good about this conversation and what has happened. And always, of course, thank them at the end. And again, the one little thing about the ending here is, again, the nonverbal. So as you're ending it, shaking hands or whatever you're doing, smiling or opening the door for them or whatever you're doing, try to end it on as good a note as you can. I don't know why I still have that in mind about having to let that lady go years ago for theft, but that was very difficult to end it on a positive note, to do anything that was natural. And so sometimes the ending is difficult. And realize if it's difficult, that's okay. Sometimes the situation doesn't allow that. Now, after the conversation's over, what is your follow-up? Okay, I want you to think in your mind now. Everyone who's listening out there, what's the one thing I'm going to do to follow up? Well, probably if you were saying things like, well, I'm going to monitor the problem. I'm going to monitor their behavior. I'm going to look at things. I'm going to have a follow-up meeting. These are more obvious things to follow up on. And most of these tie into accountability and you helping the person be accountable for the actions the other person has agreed to. That's important. You all know how to do that you help the person become accountable. What's interesting is I work with a lot of managers, though, who just don't follow up, who don't hold the person accountable. And that's important. Well, hang on to your seat because I'm going to give you out of the program 3 other things besides accountability that you want to do when you follow up. Okay, and these are probably going to surprise you. The first process is keep a journal. When you have a difficult conversation, go back to your office, note what went well, note what you might have done differently. You see, I want you to learn and document for yourself lessons learned. I want you to think through what you might do differently because that's where some of your best learning is going to take place. When you go back, keep that kind of journal, keep that note about yourself. How did you handle it? Secondly, the second paragraph here. At a later time, I want you to ask the other person how they felt about the conversation. How did it go for them? What might you have done differently to make it go better? You know, you can learn from their perspective. Not only can you learn from their perspective, it adds a little more closure to what took place. They might still have some tense feelings about it. They may have some feelings that are uncomfortable. And so this follow-up conversation helps make everything okay. And again, that's the first 2 things you can see. Those aren't things we typically do, but they are very huge learning vehicles for you. And the third paragraph here is compare with some colleagues. Find out what others do, share experiences in navigating a difficult conversation with colleagues. Be open to hearing what they do and their suggestions for your improvement. This also is, of course, a third way to learn. It's a way to find improvements over what you had done. And you'll often get another point of view. You may not agree with that point of view, but you'll get a point of view that often is more comfortable. So that's follow-up, stage 7. Okay? Now, those are the 7 stages. I want to tell you that this is a great workshop. It's an opportunity for you to share some great knowledge with others in your organization, especially if you're one of the trainers that are out there, or if you are a coach or a consultant that's working with companies. It's a great way to learn these 7 steps. I enjoyed talking to you about this workshop and about this subject. Like I said, it's an everyday kind of tool. So thank you for your attention. And I'm going to turn the microphone back to Sarah. Sarah, did any questions come in also while we were having this conversation?
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Gary. We do have a couple questions. It looks like that have come in. And so go ahead and use your questions chat area. Submit any questions that you have. I'm going to queue up a couple more here. So while we wait for those to come in, let me just share for those that that are new a little bit about HRDQ. We publish training materials, research-based experiential training materials for adults that focus on workshops, assessments, up out of your seat adult learning games, reproducible workshops that you can customize like today's topic and content. And if you do need help delivering any of the trainings, or you want one of our expert trainers like Gary to either come on site or virtually either do a train the trainer or deliver the program for you in your organization, we also provide those services. So feel free to reach out to us for those as well. So let's take a look at some of the questions we've had come in. So our first question here is from Sandra. She asks, what are some good validating statements to let them know you understand?
Some validating statements to let them know you understand. Okay, so in other words, what's happening in the conversation is the other person wants to kind of check and see if you've heard them well. Well, as I mentioned a little earlier in the webinar, we offer and prefer empathy over sympathy to validate the other person. It's not that you want to give the person sympathy, but you want to empathize with either their feelings or with what their motivations are. You want to empathize with that. The workbook, let me look here real quick. The workbook on pages, let's see, 15 to 16, it talks about using empathy. And it says, empathy is the experience of understanding another person's condition from their perspective. There's a few examples here in the workbook. You must be disappointed that. I can see that this news is upsetting in that. I'm so sorry that I won't be able to. So those are kind of validating statements that let the other person know you understand what they're going through. Any
Great.
other questions?
Yes. One here from Chet, and he provides some example too. But his question is, how do you manage a difficult conversation in a group setting? And he also adds, so someone who brings their anger and frustration into the group, is negative and antagonistic and wants to get the group or the team maybe on their side. So in this case, you are not just needing to manage their emotions, but also the emotions of everyone on the team who might be influenced by this one person.
Oh boy, who typed that in? Chat? Did you say?
Chet, yeah.
Yeah, Chat. I can empathize with you on this. It's difficult when you have the whole group turning against you. Oh, this is tough. Well, let's see here. Let me flip through the book again. There's two approaches here on page 28 of the book. Coping with negative responses. It includes those suggestions. We actually talked about some of these in the webinars. Staying calm, taking a deep breath, managing your own emotions, let the other person express their feelings, opinions, ideas, respect the other person's feelings, stay calm, though, is the big one. And let's see here. On page 30 also, here's another thing. Explore alternatives. Focus on suggestions, like being aware of feelings about the situation, but focus on what's important to you and what would have a collaborative attitude among others. So in other words, I guess, Chet, keep focus on staying calm, and secondly, on resolution. That a resolution is needed on this. Wow, those are difficult questions.
I have got one more for you.
Okay.
I do. Yep. So one more question. If you do have other questions, those participating today, you can go ahead and type those in. And if we don't get to them by the time we close out, we'll respond to those by email. So go ahead and send them on through. So our last question here is from Jennifer, and she asks, when do I bring another person in to help me with the conversation?
Oh, okay, that's a good one. Now, I'm asked that a lot. First of all, your human resource representatives are going to know a lot about policy on whatever the conversation is. So I would check with them first, explain your situation and the conversation you're going to have. And but in terms of bringing someone into the conversation, maybe your boss, maybe someone in HR, someone else who can help you with the preparation would be good. So prepare and consult. In other words, get a consultant from your boss, HR, or someone else who's an expert on this situation to help you with your preparation. But I think the question here is more about the actual conversation. When do I bring someone into the conversation? I would say only if you suspect The other person could become violent or could make some claims later that might not be true, or may say something that just ridiculous. That way you have someone else to listen. And so if you bring someone in with you, I would bring them in more as a role of a listener than I would someone who is going to be adding comments much to the conversation. So for most conversations, now your HR department may have some rule about when HR comes in to have the conversation with you, like termination or things like that. Yeah, I'd say mostly use people in terms of your preparation and sometimes in your conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Gary. Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for participating in today's webinar. If there are additional questions, go ahead and send those in, and we'll reply to all of those by email. So don't hesitate to reach out to us. And we look forward to seeing you on our next session. Happy training.